Hey everyone, welcome to the Cedar Room podcast where we talk about life, family, a lot of business, and a little bit about everything else. I'm Dan Vanderkoy, husband to my stunning wife Erin, dad to our 3 wild kiddos, and owner of Mana Insurance Group. From running around playing games as a youth pastor to running an insurance company, I've experienced and learned a lot. We hope this is a place for you to come think, process, and challenge yourself to grow. Make sure you hit that subscribe button to stay connected as we talk through these ideas together. Hey everybody, welcome to the Cedar Room podcast. I am here in Solala, Guatemala with my good friend Terry McConnell, one of the co-directors at Eagle's Nest International. Terry, thanks for being on our podcast today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you look really dapper right now.
Well, we matched our shirts. I thought that was a good call.
Yeah.
We're ready for the golf course after this.
We are. There's a nice, driving range off into the lake from here, right? So Terry, you and I have known each other 2-3 years maybe now.
Yeah.
You currently serve as one of the co-directors at Eagle's Nest International. It's always been your dream and your purpose in life to be a missionary, right? You've always wanted to live abroad and do this, and that was always in the cards, correct?
That is completely incorrect.
So why don't you give me a little background on where you come from, your family, your wife, everything like that, and kind of why don't you just kind of start off your story, who you are, where you're from.
Okay. Grew up in Burleson, Texas. Terry McConnell. Three siblings, 2 brothers and a sister. Grew up in church. Was working as a firefighter in Fort Worth, Texas for 15 years. My wife was working as a flute teacher. She grew up in Arlington, Texas. We met in youth group. Got married young, and we were involved in church. Life was good, teaching in the Sunday school class. Typical Southern Texas kind of upbringing,
Yeah.
a lot of church attendance in Texas, and a lot of just a normal, typical life.
Yeah. So that would happen, and then so you and Tiffany were married. You have a couple kids. What are you doing at that time? Career? You're working for the fire department. You said.
Mm-hmm.
How long did you work for the Fort Worth Fire Department?
In total, I worked 15 years
Okay.
at the fire department. Before that, I worked for American Airlines for 7 years, and before that, I was just out of high school and working at a movie theater and having fun.
Yeah. And so, what started to kind of, I guess, change your heart, or look at maybe doing moving down here to Guatemala?
In hindsight, it was a long process that I didn't even really understand that was happening until basically it had happened.
Yeah.
So like I mentioned, we were co-teaching a young married Sunday school class, and at one point we as a class had decided we wanted to do a book study together, and we chose the book Radical by David Platt. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the book, it has a challenge, or 5 challenges for the reader. And one of the challenges talks about challenging the reader to take a mission trip somewhere outside of your hometown for sure, preferably out of your state, and if possible, to another country. And at the time when I read that, I was like, well, I think we're probably done with the study, because I can't imagine anybody's going to want to do that. And I never even brought it up.
But naturally, you started looking at like Vancouver, British Columbia, right?
I would have probably, Banff. That would be a good place for a mission trip. Hawaii, Aruba, I don't know. But no, actually, I kind of dismissed it completely until the next week when we came back after finishing the book, and there was a guy in our class who said, hey, I really think it'd be cool if we as a class accomplished the challenges to really finish the book. Yeah. And he said, I have 2 adopted brothers who came from a children's home in Guatemala. I've never seen it, and I've always wanted to visit it. And so I was thinking maybe I would go down there and see if we could do any projects. And if nobody else wants to go, that's fine. I'm still going to go. But anybody that wants to go along with me, come on. And when you're one of the co-teachers, you kind of feel like it's an obligation, because
you don't have much of a choice.
Right, because otherwise you're the guy that says a lot of stuff to do but won't really back it up.
Yeah.
And to be honest, the thought of going to Guatemala at first, I had never been out of the country. And so the thought of it was a little scary, didn't know anything about it. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I didn't even know where Guatemala was whenever I first heard I didn't know if it was in Central America, South America, the South Pacific.
Yeah.
Guadalajara, Guatemala, and Guam, they all sounded the same to me. So, but the thing that scared me the most, if I'm being honest, was the fact that he wanted to go to a children's home where he had two brothers that had been adopted from. And at the time, my youngest son was going into the 9th grade, and I had spent a lot of time thinking about the coming years of empty nest where we're going to be traveling and just the wife and I. And I really was nervous about going to a children's home, and my wife falling in love with a baby or a kid, and then wanting to adopt, and I could just foresee major disruption in our life.
You didn't want to start the diaper stage all over again, did you?
No, I didn't want any of those stages. And to be honest, I wasn't even really a kid person. I mean, I loved my kids, and I loved kids in general, but I always kind of looked at, I've got the responsibility of raising my two sons into men. And at that point, it's me and Tiffany. We're going to travel the world.
Yeah.
But when I talked to Daniel, the guy who wanted to put the trip together, he said that I said, "Are you thinking about adoption? Is that why you wanted to go to this?" He goes, "No. Just want to see it." And he said, "And besides, the adoptions are closed in Guatemala, so it's not even legally possible to do it." And in that moment, I kind of sighed a relief sigh a little bit, because I thought, well, we're safe. Even if she does want to bring a kid home, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So we came down, and that's kind of where the journey began. We came down and built walls in their school building so the classrooms could be separate. And we literally worked from morning until bedtime and just took breaks for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
This is the American way.
Right.
You got to get her done, right?
We had a plan, and we weren't going to leave until it was done. But the truth was, we had to leave at the end of the week, so we were going to get it done.
But who cares about playing with kids or make it right?
Yeah, honestly, when we left, Daniel, we were all proud of the work we got done, but Daniel was disappointed that we spent no time playing with the kids, which I didn't. I just was coming to work, and I was happy that we got the work done. But Daniel said, he goes, "I'm coming back. And when I come back, I want to work less and spend more time with the kids." And I said, "Sounds good to me. Let's give it a shot."
Yeah.
So we left, and really, both me and my wife we were fairly unimpacted by the kids situation here, other than we just felt like this was a really good place for kids to receive love and care. The one thing I do specifically remember about that first trip was meeting the missionaries that worked here at the time, Pedro and Felice. They were our age and seemed very, very similar to us, very normal, very cool. I know that's a weird word to use, normal, but growing up in church, in my experience, I had met a lot of people who had traveled across the world doing missions, and to me, they didn't seem the same as everybody that I...
Just like a little different.
A little different. I'll probably regret saying that, but yeah, that's how.
But that was your experience,
that
right?
was how I felt. And so we go to the apartments after I just met them, and me and Tiffany were talking, and they're pretty cool. I was like trying to figure out how does a young family like that end up here? Like, why are they not in the States doing what everybody else is doing? And then we go out on the balcony of the apartments, and I look out over that lake, and of course we had left Texas heat of 100 plus degrees, and now we're in 75 degrees and sunny. And I was just blown away by the view and the climate. And I was like, sarcastically, I said, I could be a missionary here. I just kind of laughed, and we both laughed. And in hindsight, sitting here in 2020, I know that God probably laughed a little bit in that moment too, because he knew what was coming, but I did not, because nothing could have been further from my radar than what I'm doing now.
I think God just kind of looked at you and was like, sucker.
I do. I think God, I think he knew he would get glory from anything and everything that happened, not me. And that's what it's about, because he changed my heart through a long process. The second year we came, same thing for me. I didn't, I saw the kids and I connected with them just in a general sense. And I, of course, connected with Pedro and Felice more, and the workers, I connected with them. But really for me, it was just, this is a really cool place for kids to get to be, because there's other homes in this country that are state run. And they're institutions, they're not homes.
Do you feel like in some ways it was like, hey, I'm doing my good deed and I can kind of make a check a little bit, and it's like, yeah, I give back.
Yeah.
Like this is what I do. And at that point, had you guys sponsored any kids or missionaries or anything, or you just kind of come down and do your trip and just?
Yeah, you're exactly right with that. Because the first time we came down here and came back, if I'm being completely honest, there were people who were like me before, had never been down there, and they were like, so what was it like? And it was kind of cool, and it made you feel good that you went on a mission trip and you helped build something for a children's home. Right. Pat myself on the back. And we weren't sponsoring kids. I felt like my contribution was showing up and
blessing them with your presence.
Right, more or less. I don't know if I'd put it exactly like that, but that's probably what my attitude really was.
Just so everybody knows, like Terry and I are both pretty sarcastic people, and we like to razz each other. So just throwing that out there.
No offense taken.
Yeah.
But that second trip down, as we were leaving, we're getting on the bus to go back. And I had a great time, and I thought, man, this is great. We can do this every year.
Yeah.
But I look over at Tiffany, and she's crying, and it's getting worse.
Crap.
She's crying.
Was it the ugly cry?
It was an ugly cry. And I was like, I was thinking back to my fears the first time, and I thought, this is what I thought was going to happen. I was afraid you're going to come down here, and this is going to be, they're going to try to change up the plan. And I just patted her, and I didn't know what to say. I was like, oh, it's okay, baby. It's okay.
Lo siento.
No, I didn't even know that much Spanish. And when she collected herself, she goes, I just want you to know, if you ever feel like God's calling us to the foreign mission field, then you have my support. And she'll tell you this to this day that
Hold on. So at this point, you're thinking like, hey, I'm totally safe coming down here. Don't have to worry about bringing a kid yet. And at any point, had you guys ever, was that out of the blue for you?
Oh, completely. I thought she was fixing, when she said, I need to tell you something, I thought she was fixing to say, if I'd like to foster to adopt, I'd like to look into adoption, something kid related. But it was much more broad than that. It was about foreign missions, and that one was never came up. We had a pretty comfortable life where we were.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And I let it go because she's still crying. I can't say anything at that moment. A few miles down the road, I pat her on the knee, and she's collected herself. And I said, listen, I just got to be completely honest. That is nowhere on my radar. Mm-hmm. I hope that's okay. She's like, I know. I don't know why I said that. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, all right, good then. We're good. We're good. So we came home. But then the third time down, so this became an annual thing for us. And it was always fun. We always look forward to coming here. But the third time down, we get here and we start visiting with the kids. And this one little girl in particular comes and stands next to me, and she's talking to me in Spanish, which I knew zero Spanish. Even being from Texas, I knew very little. Un poquito. But then she was asking me something, and then she ran off. We had a translator, and I was fixing to ask the translator, what is she saying? But she ran off, and I said, oh, never mind. Well, then she comes running back, and she's holding something, and she's asking me the same thing again. And I'm like, what are you holding? And she shows me, and it's a photograph of my family, me and Tiffany and our two boys. And we had included that picture in a Christmas gift that year for the girl who Tiffany was crying about the previous year. Like, we started sponsoring Deanna because Tiffany had made this really heart connection with Deanna that previous year. And so I'm like, wait, why does she have that picture? And I found out she was asking the translator, she was asking me, and I asked the translator what she was saying, and she was asking if we sponsor her too. And I'm looking at her eyes, she had kind of sad eyes, but she was just the sweetest thing. And in that moment, I had something just overwhelmed me, and I thought, I'm not about to tell this little girl that, no, I don't sponsor you. Mm-hmm. So my answer was, Tiffany, do we sponsor her? Because I didn't know what to say. I kind of panicked and deflected to her. And she's looking at me, and she's like, you know we don't sponsor her. And I was like, we're going to sponsor you. I mean, just like that. Yeah. And that whole week, this was day one of the trip, and that whole week, you know, she saw me, she'd come stand by me. In church, she leaned up against me. she'd give me pictures. She'd hold my hand. She always gave me hugs, and
you guys never had a daughter, right?
Never had a daughter.
You had 2 boys, right?
Yep, 2 sons, and sons are knuckleheads. And if I'd had a daughter, I probably would have spoiled her rotten.
Yeah.
But this little girl, I'm like this is crazy. Like, what is happening? Why is she coming to me? First of all, and number 2, why am I feeling all this weird feeling like I feel like I need to do something?
Yeah.
And then before we left, I found out her story. A little bit more of her story was that she had been abused by her father and her grandfather in the home, sexually, physically, emotionally, every way possible. And her 2 brothers had run away, and they ended up at the children's home. And I was just blown away that a little girl whose trust had been betrayed so much by the 2 most important men in her life, that she would have any ability to ever trust any man, and yet here she is, just loving me.
Yeah.
And I had this feeling like I want to take care of her. I want to protect her, and I want to show her what a dad is supposed to be like.
Yeah.
And so when I went home that time, it was me that was fighting back the tears. I wasn't ugly crying, because I don't do that. I'm more like Ron Swanson. No, I wasn't ugly crying, but I was. There was some dust or something in the air that day.
Yeah.
And Tiffany noticed it, and
she's like, I got you.
Yeah. and I looked at her and I said, if Irma, her name was Irma, the little girl, I said, if Irma was ever available to be adopted, I would consider adopting her. And even as it was coming out of my mouth, it was shocking me, because I had spent so much time in the years before just thinking about empty nest, planning vacations, second home in Colorado. But now all of a sudden I'm willing to put all of that on hold. And selfishly, I kind of thought, she's like 10 years old. So, I'm only delaying the whole plan by a few years anyway. Yeah. But then Tiffany reminded me, she goes, but she's got 2 brothers. So, it's a package deal. And her younger brother was only like 6 or 5 at the time. Yeah. And I was like, thank you for snapping me back to reality. That's a good point. We'll just come here and visit her, when we have a chance. And so, but for the rest of that year, like my thought process was different. Used to, it was like, we'll go to Guatemala in the summer, and then, maybe we can do a trip in the winter, hopefully. But that year, I was like, man, I wonder how Irma's doing. And man, I can't wait to see her next time I go. And the next time I went, I saw her, and it was a great, coming to Eagle's Nest that next time, I was nervous, because I thought, like, what if I'm the only one that remembers her? Like, what if she doesn't remember me and she just ignores me? Yeah, I was a little nervous. But when we got off the van, she ran to me and gave me a hug, and I was like, it just melted. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I know you know this because you fell in love with Irma too. And so I love talking to you about this, because you understand it better than most with her. But that trip, I remember thinking, like, watching Irma in her element, with her friends, with her, the other sisters in the home, with Wendy, Paola, Christina. Mm-hmm. And for the first time ever, this is like my 4th time to Eagle's Nest at that point.
What year is this?
This would have been 2015, I think. Maybe 16 by this point. But this is my first time that I'm really starting to take notice of the kids individually. Like, there's Irma with Paola, probably her best friend. There's Irma with Wendy. Yeah. There's Irma with Christina. And so now my eyes were being opened to not just kids in a home that were being taken care of, but specific kids with specific faces and names and specific stories.
They weren't just an abandoned kid anymore.
Right.
Like they became, we always talk about, this is my 10th or 11th trip down here. We always talk about there are kids, right? And at that point, they'd probably become your kids. You're taking ownership of them. You're loving them. You're seeing who God's created them to be, and see what interests they have and hobbies and skill sets. And so it becomes a lot more real, right?
Yeah,
at that point.
It definitely did. And so it kind of continued like that. In fact, by this point in time, our our youngest son was graduating high school. He came down here and worked an internship. But during the time he was here for his internship, my father's cancer came back and came back strong. And when Christian, our youngest son, left Texas, my dad was in remission. He was fine. Within about 3 weeks after he left, my dad was declining very, very rapidly. And we had already planned a trip down here, a 2-week trip, which was unusual for us, with a group for the first week and just together as a family for the other week. And then we were going to bring Christian home. But because of my dad's health, we ended up coming home at the end of that first week because we wanted Christian to get to see my dad, because we knew inevitably, barring a wild miracle, he was going to be passing away. And so we told the girls, and Tiffany and I both had connected with the older girls in the home really a lot. We told them, well, we thought we were going to be here for 2 weeks, but we need to go back because of a family emergency. Well, Deanna, if you remember from the beginning of the story, came to Tiffany and said, I'm graduating 6th grade in October. Can you be here? Can you come for the graduation? And if you've never been to Guatemala or here, that may not sound like a big deal, but a 6th grade graduation in this country is a big deal, as you know. And Deanna was 15 at the time, or 16, and so because she came here without education, it was a big accomplishment for her. And Tiffany's answer was like, I don't think so. We've already made our trip. But I told her, I said, why couldn't we? Because Christian will be in college. This is the time we've been looking forward to for 10 years.
For free time.
Well, that I've been looking forward to. Empty nest. Christian's on his own. Our oldest son, Mike, is on his own. And I said, why can't we come back? Let's just come back. And so she said, oh, well, we'll see if we can get flights. Sure enough, we came back in October. And during the time we came back in October, and to backtrack, my father, we got home. Christian got to say goodbye to my dad. We all did. He passed away. We had his funeral. The dust kind of settled, and we said, let's see what it looks like for October in Guatemala. We found a good cheap flight, and we made plans to come down here for the graduation. But a few weeks before we came, we had started another study in our church, and it was called Experiencing God. And I'm still teaching a class, and so as the teacher, there's an expectation that you're doing the study and the homework and everything. Because
and you hadn't learned that lesson from the first time.
Right, exactly. But in this book, like from the very first lesson, God was just opening my heart to things that I had never considered. Like the first lesson talks about God is always working around you. Instead of sitting around waiting for him to personally give you your burning bush experience, just see where he's already working and join in. And if you join in somewhere and you feel like that's not the right fit, he's working everywhere. Find something that fits. Find something that you have a passion for, because he's put that in you. And so I thought, well, that makes sense. And like, we're about to go to Guatemala, and God's working there. Obviously, it's a children's home, and they're taking care of orphans. And I was like, why am I thinking about Eagle's Nest? And I was like, just dismiss it. And at the end of each day, there's homework in this workbook, and it said, what did God tell you today? And we each had our own workbook, Tiffany and I. And my answer was pray. Typical Sunday school answer. Wait on the Lord. That's a good one when you don't want to do anything. Just wait. Just wait. It's funny how people who don't want to do something have no problem waiting on the Lord, but the ones who are eager to jump right into the ones that can't wait on the Lord. It's funny because we kind of use it however it suits us the best. But then we get here and we go to the graduation, and we're continuing to do that study. It's it's a 12-week study, and every week we're doing the lessons in the study. And through the process of that, God just started to speak more and more to my heart about Guatemala, Eagle's Nest, and it was starting to scare me. And I still wasn't writing any of it down in the book. I was keeping it very general.
Because if you don't write it down, it's not real.
Exactly. And if Tiffany happened to pick up the wrong workbook and see my answers, I didn't want to give her any ideas.
You're like, crap.
But at one point it became so overwhelming that I was like, this has got to just be an emotional thing, because nothing like this has ever been in my heart and my mind. So I just casually asked Tiffany one day, I was like, so, hey, are you getting anything from this study? try to play it cool.
Not divulging at all
At
about
all.
Eagle's Nest or whatever.
And her answer to me was, I don't know, are you? And she was trying to volley it back to me, but she was getting the same stuff. And I could tell in that answer.
Question with a question.
Right.
Which is a great negotiating.
Very good tactic.
Yeah.
But, and she didn't want to say anything either. And she was writing the same kinds of answers in her book because, again, if you write it down, it's real.
Yeah.
And when she said, I don't know, what are you getting? I read into that, okay, something's happening. And I said, well, to be honest, I'm getting a lot and I don't know what it means. I don't know what it is, but it has something to do with Guatemala and probably specifically Eagle's Nest. And she said, I'm getting the same thing, which was, it was a confirmation, but at the same time, it's very scary.
Yeah.
Because it makes it real.
Because it could rock your world.
Right.
Because at this point in time, you've been building up your career at the Fort Worth Fire Department, which you have told me is a job people don't leave.
You don't leave that job.
Because
it's a great career with a great brotherhood, a great schedule, a great retirement. We had a great retirement. I mean, I loved literally every part of my job. Excuse me. But, after we had talked a little bit about that, surprisingly, the next lesson talked about saying yes to God. And it said, before you can be obedient to God, before you can do anything for God, you have to say yes. Because it references Moses at the burning bush. And you see that Moses doesn't walk up to the burning bush and hear the instructions and immediately say yes. He has to wrestle through some things first. And that's in the book, it calls that a crisis of belief, because it's like, I feel certain God's calling me to something here, but I have all of these reasons, or maybe it's just this one reason. There's some good reasons that I should not be saying yes to God right now.
Yeah.
Moses said he couldn't speak well. God had answers for all of Moses' questions. And so we both felt like, okay, symbolically, we need to literally say yes to God, to this calling. So we prayed in our living room when we got back. And we said, God, whatever it is you're calling us to, whatever that looks like, we're telling you yes. We're giving you control. And before I prayed that prayer, the concept of saying yes to God seemed like an easy thing, because as a Christian, you've obviously said yes to accepting the free gift of salvation. Yeah. But in hindsight, I look at accepting Christ to avoid hell, which was really my motivation when I was a 10-year-old and accepted Christ.
You didn't like fire anyway. You're
right? Well, at the time I was not a firefighter. Okay. I firmly believed in heaven and hell, and so once you've settled that issue, at that point it's a no-brainer. Do you want to be in heaven or hell? That's a no-brainer. So yes, I accept heaven. Yeah. That's a pretty easy yes, honestly. Yeah. But when it comes to saying yes to turning your complete life over to Christ, your daily life, everything you do, not so easy. But we said yes. We opened our eyes after our prayer. We were in the living room still. We hadn't been transported or carried away anywhere. There were no beams of lights. There was no music, no angels singing. And so we just kind of looked at each other. We laughed, like almost like we both expected something, but it was silly.
What do we do now?
Yeah, what do we do? And we were like, probably need to call down there and see if they even need anything. Maybe this is just us. Maybe God wanted us to say yes, and now he's going to have us call. Like Abraham, and they're going to say, oh, thank you for offering, but no, we're fine. We got everything covered.
Please don't come. We really don't want you here.
Right, yeah. I might have been insulted, but I would have been relieved. But we called, and the answer was, actually, we need a lot of help. We've been praying for at least one, if not two more couples for a while now. There's a lot going on here. The ministry's growing, and it's more than two people can really handle. Because I was like, can we just come down more times in the year, or maybe just for the summer? And they're like, yeah, you do what you want to do or what you feel like you need to do, but we need somebody full time. Yeah. And I was like, but we don't speak Spanish. And they're like, yeah, that would be a challenge. That's me. Sorry, I dropped something. My microphone.
It's all good.
I was in hindsight, I was having that same argument with God, really, that Moses had, even though I was talking to Tiffany about, do you think we should, how do we even fit this equation? Yeah. But So they said yes, and so we're like, now what? Let's take a step. It's about taking that next step. And they're like, well, if we're going to move down there, we got a lot of stuff in this house we need to start getting rid of. Let's have a garage sale. So we had a garage sale for a lot of stuff that was older or whatever. Got rid of a lot of stuff. And then we're like, now what? Well, we probably need to tell our family. We told our kids. They weren't surprised at all because they know that we've been coming down here for all those years. Yeah. And then we decided to, at some point, put our house on the market, and it sold. I mean, within 24 hours of being on the market, we got 8 offers. All of them were over asking, some of them substantially over asking, well above appraisal even. So we're like, well, let's accept the highest one. And of course it was a higher offer than appraisal, but they agreed to pay the difference, which is kind of unheard of at that time. And so I think God was just continuing to say, see, I got you. You take the next step and I'll do it. Yeah. Here's a door that I'm opening, walk through it. Yeah. It wasn't, he never ever told me, if you do this in 5 years, you'll be doing this. And it was always just trust me on this step. Say yes. Yeah.
And I think too, a lot of times as people, whether it be a business owner, whether it be, moving your family to a new job, whatever it might be, there's a lot of times in life, like we want everything mapped out, right? Like we pray for clarity, we pray for, hey God, open this door, but we want to know the steps before we're willing to walk through it, right? And a lot of times, like God wants you to answer yes, and then you just kind of hang on, right?
Yeah. All he needs you to do is be willing. Yeah. He'll take care of it. And that this is another place where that study experiencing God was so instrumental for us because, it forced me to look back at Moses' life. He did finally say yes, and he goes into Egypt and he does exactly what God asked him to do. He told Pharaoh to let God's people go. And the first time it didn't work, and the second time it didn't work, and Moses is losing heart. And God was doing all of this for his own plan, not for Moses' plan. And it was because God was going to receive glory throughout the plagues. And then at some point, all the people left Egypt. And when, at the end of Moses' life, I always wonder if he's getting ready to die on top of that mountain, and he thinks back to 40 years earlier when he said yes to going to Egypt, to tell Pharaoh to let my people go. And then the next 40 years of his life, he was shepherding the Israelites in the wilderness. And God protected him. God took care of him. But like when he said yes, there's no way he could have known what those next 40 years were going to look like. And that was a yes to a 40-year call that he didn't know. And then you look at Paul in the Bible, and almost every letter Paul is writing, he's somewhere else, and he would rather be back. I want to be back over here with you because I loved my time with you. And God was using his missionary journeys to write scripture that would be canonized into the Bible, years later. And it's so cool looking back on history and how God works to bring himself glory. And he does that in our own life too. And even being here, I can look back on my life, jobs that I had that were they were nothing more to me than jobs at the time. But skills that I picked up doing that and things that I learned during those times have equipped me in ways that I wouldn't have been equipped any other way had I not done that.
And you had no clue that would lead to this, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of go through all that. You end up, they say, yeah, we need help. We could use you guys down here. You get down here, you kind of jump in. Always moving parts when you're in ministry, right? And even in a lot of businesses, right? There's always moving parts.
For sure.
The day never looks the same in a lot of ways. So what's your role look like now? What does a day look like for you? And there's different times a year. I mean, you have 25 to 30 teams that usually come throughout the year, a lot of them in the summertime. But what does that look like on a daily basis to you? What's your role? Who do you work with? How does all that work?
So my specific role involves, I'll break it down this way. So we have a 24-hour guardhouse at Eagle's Nest for the protection and safety of the kids. I am directly supervising the guards, making their schedule and that kind of stuff. We have a feeding program. I am really just now getting into kind of overseeing that, but we have staff that's taking care of all of it, and they're amazing.
Yep. The feeding program is not for the kids here at the children's home. It's for kids in the community
Right.
that might not otherwise get a meal.
Right.
Or yeah.
It targets the poorest kids in the community
Yeah.
to make sure they're getting a lunch
Yeah.
each week. Well, right now 3 times a week, and hopefully soon 5 times a week.
Yeah.
And then we have a group of maintenance guys, and they do all of any building projects we have, or any home maintenance for the children's home, maintenance for the cabins that the groups who come here stay in. And so I am the director over them, but again, they have a boss, they have a leader in their group. But I kind of help plan the projects, short-term and long-term, for Eagle's Nest now. And all in all, there's over 40 employees, close to 50 employees here at Eagle's Nest that are, from this community.
Yeah.
And when we have teams coming, my job is to prepare the project for the team. And then, I try to communicate with the team leader before they get here, find out group size, the group makeup, whether it's a super team like yours or a regular team like all the other ones. That was an ego boost for you. No, we have.
I need that.
I know, we all do. We have great teams, and really every team that comes brings different strengths and weaknesses. And
Absolutely.
so my job in regards to teams is finding those strengths so that we can have projects prepared that will both benefit Eagle's Nest, save us a lot of money on labor and time.
Yeah.
And find things that are going to fit the qualifications of the group coming. And the truth is, on a short-term mission team, you do want to go feel like you did something to make a difference. Obviously, emotionally, you're going to come here and you're going to spend time with our kids and get to love on kids. But making this home better when you leave than it was when you got here is a great blessing to us and to the teams.
Yeah.
So I have to always prepare that, get the materials ahead of time, talk it over with our foreman, make sure he's on the same page, check the funds and all that. And then on day one of day one when they get here, the Monday is always kind of a crazy day because I'm getting everybody where they need to be, what they need to do.
We experienced that this week, right?
We did. And your team is always usually the biggest team that comes, and so there's lots of projects going on, and it's one of the more challenging weeks, but
it's fun too.
It is very fun. I'm always exhausted when your team leaves, but it's a good exhaustion because I can look up and see everything that you guys did and what we all accomplished together, and it's really, really awesome.
Well, I think even like in that too, and you talk about the diversity of the different teams, right? I know you guys have had teams that come down in the past and they've created like a music video with all the kids in the home, or they'll do outreach in the community center. They'll put on soccer tournaments. We've done the 3-on-3 basketball where we've brought stuff from the Kurt Mayberry tournament from London down to here. We got Derek and Brett with all their weldings. So every group has kind of a different DNA and a different dynamic that they're going to bring. I think that's what I've always really appreciated about Eagle's Nest, and you and Tiffany and Felice and Pedro have always really embraced is we want you guys to come serve. But I think especially over the last few years, you guys have done a really good job of not just like having people come down with the American mindset of bury your head and get everything done, which I think is important to get projects in because it helps with the facilities, right? But it's been really cool to see the relationships that have been built with the kids. And I know just in talking with Felice over the years too, it's like the kids recognize that these teams and these people that come down is, you're leaving your family, you're leaving your job, you're paying money to come down and be a part of this family down here. And we talk a lot about the family that it is and the importance of family, and whether it's your team as a family, even us as board members, and we got a chance to meet the last 2 days nonstop, be together as a family. And I think then even to see these kids as a family, right?
For sure.
And I know that our family at home, Aaron and Taya and Case and Blake and I, we've been sponsoring kids for the last 10 plus years, and Irma being one of them, and they're family to us, right? We do anything for them.
Absolutely.
Irma and Macario and Christina and that's how this place runs, right? It's through the sponsorship. So if you sponsor, and maybe I'll talk a little about sponsorships too. I don't want this to be too long-winded, but people have the opportunity to sponsor a kid like they do through a lot of organizations across the world. I think the big difference of Eagle's Nest, right, is we're raising these kids. Right. Papa Terry, Mama Felice, Mama Tiffany.
Yeah.
You know, and we're raising these kids. And so all the money, and you guys don't take a salary from Eagle's Nest. All the donors goes directly in the general fund to support these kids.
Right.
But people also have the opportunity to come and meet these kids, don't they? And like sometimes you don't always get that with other things, right?
You don't. You know, you really don't. And you mentioned a while ago about how we don't push the work above the relationship. And it's funny because the way I was wired before God began that long change, I would have been that kind of person that would have been like, yeah, you guys are here to do this project, and that's the most important thing. But no, clearly the relationships are the most important thing. Both the relationships within the group itself, because you don't go on a mission trip with a group of people without growing closer as a group. But also the relationship between the group and us, the group and the kids. And the kids recognize the people that come back every week, every year, and they love seeing the familiar faces. And I mean, it means a lot to them that people care enough to come spend a week out of their year just for them, because they understand it is for them. Because if it wasn't for the kids in that children's home, none of the other stuff that we're doing here would be here.
Well, and I think the really cool thing for me is now you look at some of these older boys, right? You got Everett and Nahum and Eliseo, and they're working here now.
Right. And Charlie.
Charlie.
Yeah.
I can't. All his crepes that he makes are phenomenal. The guy's a chef.
He is.
And like to see these guys and to see like their vision and their heart for this place, like they could take off and they could go do something else, but yet you can provide a good wage for them. There's a need for them. And that's the thing is like when you sponsor a kid, right? It's not just going to that one kid. It's going to the 40, 50 kids that we might have in the home. It's going to all the local workers that we have, that 50 employees. We haven't even touched on the school at 200 plus kids that you guys run on site. That's one of the higher rated schools in the area. You know, so it's not just, you know, when you donate money or you sponsor a kid, it's not going just to that kid. It's supporting this family. Right.
Yeah. You know, I'm glad you said that, because a lot of times our groups will wonder about that. And it's natural that some kids more easily connect with a lot of people. They have outgoing personalities. They have winning smiles. And then you have those other kids.
Wait. You think Kevin Manuel gets lots of sponsors?
I think he probably does. But then you got those other kids that they're not as quick. They're a little more shy. They don't run to you every time they see you. And you know, it's really a cool setup that not only is your sponsorship money going to help, obviously, the kid that you are sponsoring, and that's the same kid that if you're sponsoring, you'll get an update on. You'll get to hear things specifically about that kid throughout the year. But it's paying for clothes for every kid in the home, food for every kid in the home, medicine, surgery, school tuition. That's just involving the kids. The care of the kids from the employees that work in the home, the care of the kids from the guards that are protecting the home, the care of the kids from the maintenance workers that are fixing the home, the teachers of the school who are teaching the kids. I mean, it all goes back to the kids in so many different ways, and it wouldn't be possible without it. And like you did say, and I always reiterate that we are, I believe, one of the very few ministries that the missionaries here, we're completely supported outside of Eagle's Nest support. We're supported through our local churches back home and friends and family.
And I think that's important for people to know. You know, when people are giving money, you look, I know you can go on Google and you can start looking at different things and like what nonprofits have the highest administration fees. You know, so like out of every $100 I give, how much is actually going, right? And I think that's the really cool thing about Eagle's Nest is it's not an institution, it's a family.
Right.
You guys as missionaries, you and Tiffany and Felice and Pedro and everyone, like the money, you have to raise money outside of this. You're not taking a salary from Eagle's Nest. And on top of that, we have a board as well, and that board doesn't get paid for being that board, right?
Yes, you're on the board, you would know.
Yeah, you guys should double my salary this year.
We will. We'll actually triple it. We've been talking. You're worth 3 times 0.
3 times 0? Yeah, that's good. That's good. But I think that's a really cool thing because literally 100% of what is given is going directly into the kids, right? And so I think it's cool. And I think the other thing that's really neat is we get to watch these kids grow up.
Yeah.
Right? They're not just coming here for a meal and for school that day and to get the medicine and then go back to a family. These are kids they don't have a family.
Right.
This is their family.
Yeah. And the cool thing about that is that when this place was founded and this plan was hatched, that wasn't the plan. The plan was babies and toddlers being adopted out, and then the law changed, which wasn't a surprise to God,
2008.
but right, 2008, 7 or 8, I can't remember. But all of a sudden, you go from a situation of having a children's home full of babies and toddlers that are being placed with adoptive families in the U.S. Now adoptions are closed internationally, so now all of a sudden you're raising kids, and your budget goes through the roof. Yeah. The responsibility. I mean, it changes everything. I mean, I raised my 2 sons single-handedly by myself. No, my wife actually did most of it. I was just support.
You were like a third son. Right?
Yeah.
That's what Erin says about me.
She'll tell you that I was.
Erin says, she goes, I have 4 kids.
Tiffany would agree with that statement. But, like you're constantly worried about like, okay, so they're in 3rd grade. I mean, somebody's picking on them at school. That bothers you as a parent, or man, we got to go get him a doctor's checkup. Is he growing right? All those things that you deal with. Then it's middle school and it's high school, and it's like, what are they going to do as an adult? Are they going to be living with me for the rest of my life? Or?
Not only that, but then you throw into, you got 40 plus kids living in close quarters and in a home, and they start to become teenagers, and you have girls and boys, and you have all that plays into it. Yeah. It's like camp on steroids, right?
Right. And we're always preaching family. Yeah. We are a family, so I think that does a lot to kind of squash that. But
even that, when you preach family, you have like Omar and Yancy, and Eric and Mary Soul, who just came literally yesterday, right? As house parents, and so you've actually taught them the dynamics of a family, of what a family looks like. So they're not just living in a home, but they actually have house parents now that they can be a part of. And I just think that's so cool because I think that's what the family of God's like, right? That's we're called to take care of everyone, and especially it says right in Scripture, right? Widows and orphans.
Widows and orphans. That's God's heart. Yeah. There's no religion greater than this, but to take care of widows and orphans, because they're on God's heart. Yeah. And they should be on our hearts too.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So people who listen to this, they're interested. Maybe God's stirring in their heart to try to make a difference. Maybe to come on a trip. Maybe to lead a trip. Maybe to sponsor a kid. Maybe to sponsor you guys or Felice or somebody, right? How do we do that?
Well, the website is a great place to start if you want to learn more about it. I'll start with leading a trip. Sounds intimidating and daunting, but if you reach out to, actually Tiffany is kind of heading up the trip leading process and all the pre-trip stuff, and she will literally walk you through every step. The main job of the trip leader that we don't help with is getting your group to find a flight so that you can all arrive into Guatemala City at about the same time, preferably on the same day.
Yeah.
But then from that point until you get back on the plane, we're taking care of the details for you.
Well, that's what's great, and it's really simple. Like, we come here, we eat awesome food. The food is phenomenal.
I agree.
I gained weight. Steak and potatoes the first day.
I gain weight every group season because whenever there's no groups, I eat at my house. But when there's groups, I eat here, and Angelica's cooking is
very good.
Very good.
Yeah. So, and what's nice is even just keeping it simple, right? There's a flat rate per person now, and the ability to just come. You get 3 meals a day. They have a little coffee shop and snack shack and that kind of stuff, and new projects, work with the kids, different things, and so it is fairly simple. Finding a travel agent or hopping online, finding a flight, and then you guys take care of picking them up at the hotel and everything. And so, and Tiffany's great to work with. So
I think so.
So what about what's your biggest need right now?
Oh wow, good question. I wasn't prepped for that question. No, I wasn't prepped for any of this, honestly. But, probably right in this moment, our because of legal stuff, our our budget just went up in 1 week, $5,000 a week. I would say a month. Thank you. Sorry, that's important to clarify.
That just scared me. as a board president.
Right.
What?
No, I would say clearly. I mean, money is always. When I first got here, I learned real quick that when you don't have money, little problems become big problems. If you have enough money, you can solve problems. I mean, most problems are solvable by money. Finances. If you got a kid that needs surgery, it costs money. If you need food in the home, it costs money. Yeah. Whatever you need, usually money is required in somewhere in the process to make that happen. And so when things happen here, in order for us to be compliant legally with everything, and salaries were raised, and our employees are extremely important to us, because we think very long and hard before we hire a person, because someone once said, it might have been Daniel Baisden, who is the whole reason I came here the first time, that hiring a person is a big deal, because you always have to think about the ramifications of firing that person, because you're letting somebody go who's currently feeding a family potentially with what you're giving them, and that we take that seriously. So instead of saying, no, this is our budget, we got to let employees go, we're trying to really be creative and figure out ways to raise our support and our income so that we can continue to operate as always without other things suffering. Yeah,
and there's a lot of different ways that people can get involved and give. That you can sponsor a kid. You can go to Eagles Nest. EaglesNestINT.org is the website for Eagles Nest International.
Yep.
It's a tax-deductible gift that you can give. You can do it one time. But I think, what really, really helps us, and this is now me speaking from the board perspective, right, is being able to have those recurring monthly donors, right? I think what's cool is you will get correspondence, you'll get updates on the child that you sponsor. But even just saying, hey, you know what, I just want to give to this general fund, because that's where it's going to go anyway, and just to help out can be really key. And so I'd encourage people. It's been really cool over the 10 years that we've been doing this. Like, my kids go to bed every night and they pray for Irma, and they pray for Macario, and they pray for Christina.
That is so cool. That's great for your kids to grow up learning to think about other people too.
Yeah. And then my daughter Taya is here for the first time. She's 11 years old.
That's awesome.
And it's
she having fun?
She's having a blast.
Awesome.
She's got to put up with you a little bit. But.
I know. I'm working them pretty hard this week.
but it's so cool.
I wanted to say one thing you said, and it's kind of just a small detail, but something I'm excited about that we just this week changed in our meeting. I want to remind you that you mentioned giving just to the general, but you're still going to get an update on somebody different every time updates go out, because we want our supporters to be able to stay connected with our kids. If they're not getting an update on the same kid every time, we want them to see what's going on in another kid's life. And so, like you said, the relationship building that takes place between our supporters and our kids is key. Yeah. And it's important to the kids, it's important to the supporters, and it's important to us.
Yeah. So. Yeah. That probably does it. We've been talking a while.
I know. Sorry, I was a little long-winded. They're going to be out of film on the camera.
Yeah, probably.
Showing my age.
Well, hey, but seriously, in reality, thank you for taking time.
You bet.
I know it's a busy week with 40-some people running around here. And you guys listening or watching, I'd encourage you guys, find out how to get involved. Go sponsor a kid. Make a difference in these kids' lives. Start to build a relationship. Think outside of your own bubble, right? Think outside of your community and the American mindset, and recognize that whether you want to sponsor as a business or a youth group or individually as a family, as a person, for about $1 a day, you can do that. And it really makes a big impact.
Yeah. So when God calls, say yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
Because He'll take care of the details.
Yeah. So thanks, everybody, for listening to the Cedar Room podcast today. I'm Dan Vanderkoy with Terry McConnell. Thanks man. Love you, brother. Love you. That was good. Thanks, guys. Have a good week.